Steve Simon is kind enough to join us. He is the Secretary of State of the state of Minnesota. He is a very busy man, so I'm very honored that he has some time to chat with us today about the primary day tomorrow and voting by mail. Secretary Simon, thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Hey, good to be with you. Thanks for having me.
My absolute pleasure. I want to start off with the astronomical number of requested ballots, mail-in ballots. Is it 637,463? 637,463. That is apparently is way beyond anything we've ever had in the state, correct?
Oh, yeah, by leaps and bounds. I mean, it is huge. It's a huge number at this rate, and I don't know where the rate is going to go. It could go up or down. I predict it might even go up. We'll be at about 1.2 million by November 3rd, by Election Day. And just to put that number in perspective, we're expecting about 3 million voters, give or take, in Minnesota. So as a percentage, that is a good bit over a third. I think it's likely to climb even beyond that. But people are trying to tell us something, and we ought to listen to what they're trying to tell us, which is this year, for some of the obvious reasons, they really are embracing voting from home.
Well, and it is such the no-brainer. I mean, you have a pandemic going on. Obviously, this is for a lot of people the safest way to be able to vote and have a voice in our country.
That's right. And look, I mean, normally the pitch for voting from home, which was already gaining popularity in Minnesota even before anyone had heard of COVID-19, normally the pitch is comfort and convenience, right? You can order the ballot to come to you. You can vote with your feet up. You can vote while you're listening to the radio, watching TV, eating a meal, whatever. But this year there's the added dimension of, first, minimizing some risk, and secondly, there's a public service angle here. Everyone who votes from home this year is making the polling place just a little bit safer for those who choose that option tomorrow or on November 3rd. And I'm not just talking about the voters. I'm talking about the poll workers, too, who we rely on, 30,000 of them that it takes throughout the state to run an election. So let's not forget them.
The number of return ballots, 423,032, that's as of today. One of the reasons I got in touch with you today is I got back from coming up from up north and immediately was inundated with people that were concerned about the mail-in balloting. Overseas voters, people that are had sent in their ballot, they haven't been able to track it yet. Let's talk a little bit about this because there's been a lot of national stories about whether or not the mail-in ballots are getting to their destination on time like they usually would.
Right. Well, I am concerned by some of the reports that we're all seeing right now about slowdowns and allegedly intentional slowdowns, in some cases, of the U.S. Postal Service. Now, we've got that covered in Minnesota for a number of reasons, but it still is cause for all of us to plan and to plan for more time for all things, not just ballots. Anything we're sending by mail to take a little bit of extra time, sadly. So, for example, the rule for the primary tomorrow is you can get your mail ballot back if it's postmarked by tomorrow, but gets there by Thursday. Now, that might be too slim a margin for many people to stomach, depending on where you live, in which case my advice for any of your listeners who right now have a ballot and are thinking of sending in, I would say, if I were you, I would say instead of popping it in the mail and hoping it gets there by Thursday, I would say the best thing to do is to hand deliver it or have a friend or someone you trust hand deliver it to the place listed on the outside of the envelope. So you don't have to send it back by mail. You can get it there physically by other means. And at this point, on Monday before the Tuesday, that's what I would do.
I've actually, although I'm not, I don't want to accuse any of the local postal employees of anything nefarious, but I have noticed that there are even local bills I'm mailing in Hopkins to another Hopkins address seem to be taking 3 and 4 days as opposed to used to be overnight on a regular mail. And so, yeah, I think that is the safe bet. And once again, I want to repeat that, though, because as long as it's postmarked by tomorrow but received by Thursday, that's the only – if it comes in after Thursday, that vote will not be counted then, correct?
Correct.
All right. The in-person, obviously, and you brought up poll workers. Let's why not pander and praise them quite a bit here because this has got to be one of the most intimidating elections on record, a major pandemic going on. You have a lot of people who have been there every election. They're going to show up again tomorrow. Are we anticipating a staffing problems or anything like that with the primary vote tomorrow?
No. Tomorrow, most places feel really good about it. There's usually not quite the demand, obviously, not quite the turnout, and so therefore not quite the staffing needs. The general election, though, we really have to keep our eye on. Look what happened in Wisconsin in early April. Look what happened in Georgia about 6-7 weeks ago. Some of the upheaval, even chaos in the polling place, was due to inadequate staffing, election judges, poll workers. And so we can't have that happen in Minnesota. We don't want that to happen, and we need to try to avoid that. Now, it's the cities and the counties that hire, train, and pay the election judges. But our office is trying to have their backs. And we are meeting in a series of meetings across the state, virtual meetings, of course, to provide some feedback, some advice, to share best practices on strategies to make sure those slots can be filled. And for your listeners' benefit, anyone who's interested in doing that job, in being an election judge and being a poll worker, 2 ways to do it. Number one would be to go to mnvotes.org. That's our website, mnvotes.org. You could fill out an interest form. But I would say the better way, even better than that website, is to contact a city hall. It doesn't even have to be your city hall. There's no geographic restriction. So if you live in Minnetonka and you hear that they need folks in Maple Grove, you can do that, or vice versa. So contact a city hall. I guarantee you they will be thrilled to get your phone call. Keep in mind, this is not a volunteer gig. This is very much a paid opportunity. You even get paid for the 2 hours of training that it takes, and that's it, only 2 hours, but you get paid for it. And it's a great way to help democracy and to backfill what we expect to be the need that comes out of some of the usual trustee election judges taking themselves out of circulation. No big secret to your listeners, I bet, from personal experience, that our election judges, our poll workers, tend to skew older. They tend to be disproportionately retirees or seniors, and they do a phenomenal job. But for some obvious reasons, some of them are just taking themselves out of the running this year, and we need to backfill or replenish their ranks. And so for your listeners, it's a great opportunity, a great way to help the election system and get paid. So I hope you'll consider doing that job.
And we should mention that, as you brought up, I mean, even if we have the pie-in-the-sky mentality towards the mail-in votes, that still means two-thirds of the voters in the state are planning on showing up and voting in person, potentially.
Right.
And so, and that obviously is a major key on that. Going back to the mail-in votes, how is this going to get counted here? Because obviously there have been some cases in some states where it's been a long time. I don't even know if we still know what happened in Iowa, but you have some states where you have the mail-in voting, and it does seem to delay the results coming in. How is it going to work here in Minnesota?
Well, let me talk first about tomorrow, because
Okay.
it's right in front of us, the primary election. So just so your listeners know, election night is going to look a little different and feel a little different. We're used to a certain instant gratification on election night where we know, with some rare exceptions, what the outcomes are going to be. That might not be the case tomorrow night, and just so you know, that is by design. No one, when this happens, not if, but when there are delays, should say, oh, I wonder if someone screwed up, or did my county or city fall asleep at the switch. No, this was by design. The legislature, wisely this last session, anticipating this tidal wave of requests to vote from home, gave counties and cities 2 extra days after the election to count all of these ballots. So what that means is that tomorrow night, election night, primary night, they will be able to report all the in-person totals, just like they would on any election day, and that will be the majority of the totals. They will be able to report all of the absentee ballots that they have in hand so far, but ballots are going to be coming in also the next day and the day after that, on a Wednesday and Thursday. So on a rolling basis, we're going to know more, and finally we'll know everything as of Thursday night. Now, realistically, I think what that means is we'll probably know the vast majority of outcomes on Tuesday night, because we're going to know how many ballots are outstanding. And you can do the math, right? If candidate A is ahead of candidate B by 1,000 votes, and there are only 800 votes, absentee ballots outstanding, then you know, mathematically speaking, candidate A is going to win no matter what happens with the absentees. And I think that'll be the situation in the vast majority of primary contests. But you never know, right? The final result, the final word won't be known until Thursday. And I just want to repeat, that's by design. That was written in law this year, one-time only deal just for 2020 because of the extraordinary circumstances surrounding the election. So everyone's just got to sit back a little bit, be patient, understand that this is an extraordinary year, as you all already do, given your own lives. This is very on brand for 2020, right? Something that's just kind of going rogue and just unconventional. But that's the way it's going to be, and just understand that that's the way it was designed to be.
It does sound like some counties have already been a little proactive and said, in rural counties, if I'm not mistaken, have stated that their plans are to release numbers in the 2 days within the window that they've been given by the legislature. Is that correct?
Yes, that's right. And it's really up to each county. Some counties are, and we're encouraging counties to do this, which is, don't just go dark for a couple days. Give at least a daily update, or even more than that, say on Wednesday or on Thursday morning. But a county could decide to report what it has on Tuesday and then say, see you in 2 days, and just sort of go silent for a couple days. They could do that. We're urging them not to do that for all the obvious reasons. I think transparency and just the public wanting to know. But look, some counties are really strapped, and in terms of just bandwidth and people power and staff, they're really getting slammed. And so it's not because they're trying to be secretive, I suspect. It's because they're just trying to do their job and keep their head down and then report the results when they get them.
Let's turn towards the general election. Obviously, a lot of stuff in your office is going to be very busy tomorrow. But once again, we do have a lot of concern that, particularly on the federal level, the feeling is we're going to try to slow down the system, especially if it looks like the worse these numbers start looking for Trump. The feeling is, and we've already had it last Friday, there was quite a few people from the Postmaster General fired a few people from the U.S. Postal Service that were in leadership positions. There has been a lot of reports of, I had a friend that messaged me this morning that he mailed in an overseas ballot in June, in late June, and it finally got there today, which, the feeling is, okay, this is taking a long time. What are you doing to be proactive waiting for this in case there does seem to be some issues that start to crop up?
Yeah, so I've been in pretty close touch with Senator Klobuchar and our staff, with her staff, about exactly this issue. She has been appropriately vocal and aggressive on this, which I think is good. She's the one who can get answers, I think, at the federal level pretty readily, or I hope she will. I and a number of other secretaries of state from other states are actively right now trying to get a meeting with the new Postmaster General. I want to some extent reserve judgment until he and his team have had a chance to answer our questions, and I hope they do. But I remain concerned, really concerned, about some of the reports we're seeing. I don't know if some of your listeners, or if you saw over the weekend, the Washington Post did a story about a Minneapolis housing high-rise that did not receive mail for, I think it was 6 days in a row last week, right before an election, and there are numerous residents who have not yet received their absentee ballot. So to not receive mail for whatever it was, I think it was 6 days in a row, I just don't get it. I understand concerns about COVID and trying to be safe, but that seems excessive. A 6-day total absence, a total blackout of any mail service. And it's not just about ballots. It's about, pharmaceuticals and other really important things that people are sending and receiving by the mail. So that's totally unacceptable to me, not just in the election context, but in any context. And we need to find out what's going on. There have been public reports that the new Postmaster General has, for example, suspended or stopped overtime pay, which traditionally has been what the Postal Service relies on in a high-volume situation to get more mail out more quickly, and as a cost-saving measure has gotten rid of that with predictable results. And my worry, and not just mine but others, is that backlog will just continue and get worse and worse and worse, and by late October could have a real impact when it comes to ballots. Now, if and when that happens, I hope it doesn't, but if and when it does, our office, and I'm sure my colleagues around the country, will advise our voters exactly on that. So our guidance for the primary election was, just to be safe, mail it back a week in advance. Mm-hmm. The day may come in October when we're saying mail it back 8, 9, 10 days in advance. I hope we don't have to go there, but we'll go there if we need to go there.
Just for timeline's sake on the general election, when would early ballots be available, mail-in ballots be available?
September 18th.
September 18th.
So Minnesota and South Dakota are tied for the longest absentee period, 46 days before the election. So we two states will be the first to vote for President of the United States in the general election. You can vote in Minnesota starting September 18th.
I would make a very decent argument that the Postmaster General might try to slow down mail for 6 days, but 46 days is not going to fly. And so, a safe bit of advice is, if you really want to make sure your ballot gets in, you basically, when early voting happens for the general election, get that ballot in right away.
Yeah, I mean, get it in as soon as you comfortably can, as soon as you know who you're going to vote for, I would say. And try to know who you're going to vote for as early as possible, is the way I would put it, just to maximize the opportunity there to get that ballot in. Just so your listeners know, and this holds obviously for the primary and for the general election, we have a feature on our website that allows you to track your ballot. So you don't just have to put something in the mail and hope and say a little prayer that it gets there. You can know with certainty whether it has. So if you go to mnvotes.org, mnvotes.org, you'll see there it says track your ballot, and you just enter your information, and you can – I just did this a few days ago just to check on myself, and it'll tell you the date that it arrived, and it will give you the assurance in writing that it's being processed. So you don't have to wonder whether it's gotten there. You'll know the exact date it arrived.
mnvotes.org is one of the best dang sites you can actually go to because it gives you so much information. Obviously, for tomorrow, the main goal is that if you are going to vote in person, it will tell you exactly where you're going to be able to vote, correct?
That's right. And you know, one other thing, if I could, to those who plan to go in person tomorrow, you know, in good ways, it's going to look and feel different as well. Our office has spent the time and energy and money to purchase and distribute to all 3,000 polling places across Minnesota supplies and PPE. So when you go in there, you're going to see that the election judges are going to have high-grade, almost surgical-grade masks. There will be more regular-grade masks available for any voter who comes in without one. We're going to have hand sanitizer and pumps and wipes and rules of the road, which we drafted in conjunction with the Department of Health, that will govern things like cleaning the surfaces of polling stations after the use of every voter. Things like social distancing, the use of pens, and that kind of thing. So I just want folks to know that we're going to make the polling place as safe as it can possibly be. We're really doing our best to make sure the supplies are in there and it will be clean and safe.
All my best to you and your staff. Great job as always, Secretary. It's a Herculean effort whenever this comes up this year in this primary, in this general election. It's really going to be some heavy lifting. I am so glad you're in that office, my friend, because you're doing a great job. Thank you, sir.
Thanks for having me. We'll talk again soon, I hope.
I hope we will. We'll definitely talk before the general election. Steve Simon, Secretary of State for the state of Minnesota. I want to repeat the website here, too, mnvotes.org, mnvotes.org.